Okay, I've always wanted to know if we can connect with the field and we can heal ourselves, why do we ever die?
So let's answer it from a soul standpoint, and let's answer it from a theoretical, philosophical, spiritual standpoint. How's that sound? Okay. Most people die because they're in a genetic program that if you were truly living completely in the present moment, all of your attention and energy were in the present moment, then you would be out of the program. Yes or no? Where are you? I didn't want to lose contact with you. So it would make sense then that when your body is programmed into a predictable future based on what you've did in the past, then it's almost like a predetermined destiny. Yes or no? Another way to say it is you're rushing to your death. I don't know how else to say that. You get it? So imagine, as I said all week so far, the genes that have been signaled, and certain genes are more hardwired than others. And when you notice that tendency when you're at home and you want to get up and start your day and you got emails and you just go, oh, wait a second, and you come back to the present moment, that's unnatural. That goes against the program. And people lose their free will to a program, and all of a sudden now, the will is getting greater than the program. And they're literally changing a line of time. That's what we're doing. Are you with me still? Come on. Yes. So, there's not a lot of evidence that shows that people can be immortal, and yet there's an immortal gene. Cancer cells have the immortal gene signaled a lot of times. So then your will to live has to be greater than your fear of dying. Are you with me still? So then, if there's an immortality gene, then on some level it has to be selected and instructed. Yes or no? And there are fables, whether you believe them or not, historic figures, charismatic leaders, spiritual beings that have overcome death. Are you with me still? Now I'm sure, here we go, my mother's going to love this. I'm sure that Jesus, the night before his crucifixion, I'm sure he wasn't saying, man, I'm just not up for this. I got a headache, I'm a little anxious, I'm a little worried. He took it on because that was his initiation. But I came across a book many years ago, a series of books called The Life and Teachings of the Masters from the Far East. Have you read that book? I can tell you have. And it was about a researcher named Beard Spalding who went to the Himalayas. And he was looking for the masters in the Far East. And I was just in my early 20s, and I don't know, I guess I was just hot pursuit of all of that. And I read the book. I couldn't stop reading it. I read them once and twice and three times because these were the masters that really lived in the Himalayas. They didn't need to be in social consciousness, and they would appear in one place and disappear, and they would all trek across, and then the guy would trek across for 2 days, and the other guy would already be there. And he'd say, oh, I just took my light body over there. I'm just laying down at home. I started going, wow, what is this? Now, it would require then someone who has actually accomplished it to be able to teach it, because they would know the journey. Yes or no? And it would have to be ascending to greater levels of energy. And theoretically, when all that energy is sitting right in that pituitary gland, and all that energy is in your brain, of all the historic figures of the light around their head. I mean, that's when you're transcendent. Your divinity is greater than your humanity. Are you with me still? So theoretically, there's a gene for immortality, but it's got to receive the right signal. Now, I don't think that signal is going to be chemical. Just saying that the 98.5% of all those genes that can be selected and instructed, my theory is it's going to have to become acted by electromagnetism, a greater frequency than matter, because it makes sense then a coherent signature of energy is going to be greater to change matter than matter changing matter. Chemistry is slow frequency of matter changing matter. Are you with me still? And there's little antennas on receptor sites that pick up the frequency of the chemical as it gets closer, and then the flower just kind of changes, and there's a lock and key phenomenon that goes on. It's a vibrational match, but it's very slow frequency. But the receptor sites on the outside of the cells happen to be 100 times more sensitive, in some references 200 times more sensitive to electromagnetism than to chemistry. Are you with me still? So nature has a principle called endowment. You know what endowment is? Nature doesn't waste anything. If you don't use it, you lose it, and that's evolution. And yet we have these big brains. We got this storehouse of DNA, and yet we haven't tapped into it. Would you agree? So then if the signal is more energy and it's coherent energy, and the person is raising their frequency and they're above their reactions to their environment, they've mastered fear. They would be out on that course every day until they walked across it with no fear at all. Eyes open, eyes closed. That's just what they would do. Do you understand? But they would need a hierophant. They would need a teacher. They would need someone who crossed that same path to be able to instruct them. So then the soul kind of works intimately with our DNA, because at the end of your life, when you die and you leave your physical body, you're a conscious sovereign being, and the divine has to get to know how you did. So you as a consciousness, the soul goes, take a seat. Let me just show you the show that we've been watching the whole entire time. And the soul plays back the entire life. But the thing is that you're not only experiencing it as you're observing yourself, and you're experiencing the feelings of how you're affecting everybody else. And all of a sudden you have these tremendous insights like, oh, that didn't go so well. Or you see that you keep making the same unconscious mistake. And I don't know about you, when I see myself making the same conscious mistake, sooner or later I want another shot at it. And so the soul goes, well, you want to go? Let's go. And you as a conscious being say, I got to go and take care of that. Are you with me still? So you descend back into density. You forget who you were so that you can come back and do it again. And your whole life may be for that one moment where you have to make a different choice. That one moment where you have to decide. Are you with me still? Yes. And if you make the choice and you evolve, then of course the experience then begins to change your genetic expression. Are you with me still? And now the soul retires that into wisdom, and it keeps it. And that's what you're taking back to the unified field, back to singularity. What you don't own and don't master still has dealt with. So then the soul says, okay, let's look for a woman that comes from, that would be in a middle-aged, a middle-class family, and half Hispanic, half white. Newark, New Jersey would be a good place, and I don't know why, I'm making stuff up. And let's make sure that she gets the pattern in the genes that's equal to the soul. And let's set up the conditions in the environment perfectly so that that person can experience where they're limited. Now, if the person is unconscious, then it would make sense then that the person would want to experience what the other person experienced, so the soul can go, whoa, I'll never do that again. So in a sense then, it's not the personality that chooses the body or the parents, or it's the soul that chooses it. Does that make sense? But if a person gets caught in routine and gets lost in the quagmire of life, then the ego takes over and the soul is diminished. And now the person is doing their best to become a somebody, a someone, own something, be somewhere in some time. And of course, if that's the journey, and the person's not willing to find wisdom or look for truth, then they can play on that level for as long as they want until they're tired of it. And when they finally get bored with it, and they'll want to choose something else. And eternity is a long time, wouldn't you agree? So then the soul then says, okay, here's the options, probable lines of time. There are probable lines of time that are the more probable than others. And there is a probable line of time for living in the same body and raising your frequency to the point where you can go wherever you want with your body. That's the ultimate, yes or no? And you can whip bread out of nothing, and you can be in two places at once, and you can be on an alternate universe and have a whole life there, and you can be dimensional. That's the freedom of when you've mastered yourself and you've mastered the conditions. But most of us are headed in a certain timeline based on our genes and based on our own personal evolution. And that's what makes this time right now so powerful. This time right now is the age of information. And in the age of information, ignorance is actually a choice. And people are beginning to realize that I don't need a doctor to find out what my disease is. I don't need to go to the library or talk to my teacher. I can just find the information. And people are starting to wake up to greater understandings, and that is starting to become the collective. And that collective energy in the field, the collective consciousness, the collective awareness is changing the future of humanity. Yes or no? And at the same time, the past is crumbling. There is economic collapse, there's political collapse, there's religious collapse, there's environmental collapse, there's all of that is breaking down. Journalistic collapse. I mean, who watches the news and expects to hear the truth? I mean, it's just all falling apart, and it's becoming so obvious to people that all of a sudden they're realizing that the people that run the world, or people that are in places of power, are actually really, really worse off than you and I. And the only thing that has to happen is that we have to collectively become one mind. And when we collectively become one mind, we no longer are seduced by those things. And we are now like a flock of birds all moving in the same direction, and those fish all of a sudden moving as a school. Nobody's leading, everybody's leading. And now the awakening of this, even if we change little timelines just this week, we changed lines of time. You change something about yourself, you are going to walk into a different future that is your genetic timeline. And now you're bumped off course. You just got to be willing to stay in the unknown and be comfortable with it. And that's when you're at your greatest. Are you with me still?
Yes.
So we're moving towards that point where more and more things are becoming more difficult to predict as the old collapses. And all of a sudden, the leaders that run the world are being exposed. And now people are starting to unify and saying, I don't believe anything any longer. What do I do believe in? I believe in me. What do I do believe? I believe in you, because we're a tribe now. We're a mini culture.